In reading the aphorisms of Patanjali, he was talking, now you have to remember, we're talking about before the Middle Ages, which were called the Dark Ages. And here was Patanjali writing about the ability to be able to do absolutely miraculous things. The ability to be able to be in more than one place at the same time. The ability to be able to be in the presence of another human being and raise your energy to such a level that you could literally, by your presence alone, just heal that person. The ability to be able to transcend things like diseases. The ability to be able to have the gift of fish and loaves. To just live at such a level of consciousness that anything you placed your attention on instantaneously, you had the capacity and the power to be able to make that realization for you. The book is called How to Know God. Now, it's not called How to Know About God. It's not called How to Believe in God. It's called How to Know God. And How to Know God means making conscious contact with God. It's the only way you can know anything. So here are the 5 aphorisms. The first is called, "The central act of ignorance is false identification." The central act of ignorance is called false identification. What does Patanjali mean by false identification? And what does he mean by ignorance? Ignorance is not to be assumed to mean that you are uninformed. It means that you are identifying yourself as a human being with your body and your possessions and this material world. And the central act of that ignorance is the identification falsely with this world of the changing. But beyond the world of the changing is the changeless world. And once you start to identify yourself there and know that this is who you are, know it, like you're listening right now and you're watching, and the energy that is coming into you is coming through your eyes and ears and senses. And it is only your eyes and your ears and your senses that take this energy and twist it into something called evil or problems. It comes into your eyes, these energies, and into your ears, if it could be examined just before it hits your eyes, and just before it reaches your ears, and we could examine it very carefully, you would find that the scientists would say, no, there's no problems in that energy. There's no evil in that energy. Nope, it's just energy. It's just a frequency. It's vibrating at a certain speed. But as soon as it hits your senses and you begin to interpret it, problems begin to show up in your life. But the energy itself contains no problems. It's just energy. That's proper identification according to Patanjali. That's the first aphorism. The second aphorism sounds like this. The mind of the truly illumined, said Patanjali, is calm, because the peace of God within all things is known, even within the appearance of misery and disease. Even within the appearance of misery and disease. The mind of the truly illumined is always calm. And the mind of the truly illumined understands that the peace of God is in all things. You are in this world, but what? You are not of this world. That is not who you are. You are not of this world, even though you're in it. So you're filling out the forms, you send in your money to the IRS, and you stop at the red lights, and you obey the laws, and you follow the rules, that is, most of them, which seem to make sense, and the ones that don't, you're able to ignore, which you have to, otherwise we'll never have any growth. The third aphorism is quite simple, and it's one that's most troubling to many people in the West. Patanjali said, sin is non-existent. Sin is non-existent. There are only obstacles to one's ultimate union with God. You do not sin when you behave toward another person in a harmful way, when you steal from another person, when you violate any of the commandments or whatever. You have not sinned. you have created an obstacle to your union with God. You see, the reason we don't want to put sin in there, according to Patanjali, is because it creates shame and guilt. Shame computes the absolute lowest in whether you're going to be strong or weak in your life. Shame is the lowest frequency emotion that is possible. It only computes at 25 on a scale of 1 to 1,000. The fourth aphorism that leads us into a spiritual solution to every problem sounds like this. And these last two are the ones that I absolutely resonate to and love the most. The person who is steadfast in his abstention from falsehood has the power to obtain for himself and others the fruits of good deeds without having to perform the deeds themselves. Steadfast in abstaining from means that you never waver and you never have thoughts of falsehood, that is, identifying yourself as a material being rather than a spiritual being. And when you become steadfast in that, when you say to someone, God blesses you, they are blessed by your presence when you have that kind of consciousness. And you present yourself to someone and you are absolutely steadfast in abstention from falsehood. And in the presence of such a person, healing takes place. And blessing takes place. And the fifth aphorism, my favorite of all, says, when a person is steadfast in his abstention from harming others, then all living creatures will cease to feel enmity in his or her presence. So when you become steadfast in your abstention from ever having a thought of harm directing at other people, and that's how you walk through the world, butterflies will land on your shoulder. Birds will not be afraid of you. Little dogs, or even vicious dogs, will become domesticated by being in your presence. All living creatures, babies, will goo-goo and come to you. You know people like this, don't you? And what you'll do is set into motion these dormant forces, which will collaborate with you because you're in spirit rather than in form. Line by Albert Einstein when he was talking to his students about trying to solve mathematical problems and equations. He said, you can't ever solve a problem with the same mind that created it. It's what they call sometimes in management circles thinking outside of the dots or outside of the box. Getting out of your comfort zone. Getting out of looking at things the way you've always looked at them. And having a different kind of an awareness. I came across this quote not too long ago. Moving away the clouds does not make the sunshine. It merely reveals what was hidden all along. The sunshine, the sun is always there. And you don't make it shine by just taking things away. There's something inside all of us that is hidden. And it's the ability to, I call it rewriting our agreement with reality. It requires a new kind of awareness, a willingness, if you will, to see yourself as potentially capable of virtually anything. I've always loved the observation from the New Testament of Jesus, that even the least among you can do all that I have done and even greater things. That within each and every one of us there is this ability to be healers. There's this ability to be able to manifest and attract anything into our lives that we put our attention on. There's this ability to live at such a high level of consciousness that we can transcend our bodies My internal wiring has always been one of whatever it is that I've got in my life as a problem, that I have to take responsibility for it, but I also have the capacity to be able to change it. And not only to change around what it is that is not working for me, but also to change around what I have been attracting into my life. I think it begins with this this whole idea of being inspired. I've always liked that word, inspired, inspiration, because its origin is in spirit. And then the opposite word is being informed. And so when you're in form, in the physical world, when you're in form, you get information. You get lots of information. And this is what we call the information age, right? So there's no shortage of information. They say that on a little chip the size of your thumbnail, we can put the names and addresses of everybody in the United States and Canada on a little chip the size of your thumbnail. That's really more information, I think, than we need. What we are doing is we are moving from the age of information to the age of inspiration, I believe. And as we move into the age of inspiration, where collectively mankind is beginning to have a collective capacity to be able to think thoughts which empower us rather than which weaken us, which, according to Hawkins' research, up until about 1985 or 1986, collectively, mankind's collective thoughts always produced that which weakens us. And now, in the last few years, we have moved above the level where man's collective consciousness is at least at a place where collectively we are empowering ourselves rather than using force. And as we move into the world of inspiration, we have to understand what that means. And Patanjali had a wonderful observation. I wrote about it in Wisdom of the Ages. He said, when you are inspired, that is, in spirit, and remember, it is in the world of spirit, it is in the world of thoughts where we change, where we go to the place where we create anything we want for ourselves in our lives. So that remembering here, the theme is that you can't solve any problem that you might have in your life with the same mind that created it. So you're moving into a place now called spirit. That which is seen hath not come from that which doth appear. We're moving into the world of the invisible now. When you are inspired, and think about the moments in your life when you've had the most inspiration, inspirado. You lose any touch of fatigue. I have gone and been inspired at moments in my life when I have written for almost 24 straight hours without stopping, without eating, without thinking about sleep. I just got into one of those modes, what we call a zone sometimes, where everything just flowed. When you are in that place, you transcend everything. And you don't worry about whether people are going to call you or not call you. You don't worry about your children. You don't worry about being sick. You don't think about the cold that you might have. You don't think about being tired and how much sleep you'll need. When you're inspired, you're in spirit. When you're in spirit, you're connected to your source. And now what you're doing is you're moving out of the mindset of inform or information, which is where all problems occur in the world of the physical, and you're shifting into the world of spirit. The solution for me represents the ability to bring to your life something that can make these things called problems disappear, dissolve, and nullify. And that is what I spoke about when I opened up here a little while ago about energy. Energy comes in the form of fast and slow, high and low. And higher and faster energy nullifies lower and slower energy. A room full of darkness. Darkness is a lower and a slower energy, if you measure it, than is light. And when you bring light to the presence of a dark room, the darkness disappears. And that is a metaphor for every single one of the problems and concerns and struggles that you are facing in your life. And way back, 800 years ago, there lived a little man who gave up all of his possessions. He lived in a little village in Italy, near Florence, called Assisi. And we named one of our most famous cities in America after him. His name was Francesco, or as he became known later after his passing, Saint Francis of Assisi. And I went to Assisi, and I had miracles that took place for me in visiting Assisi on several occasions. And St. Francis was one of these people who created a prayer that is perhaps the most well-known prayer on the planet today, certainly one of them. How can I become an instrument of thy peace? The ego is the part of us that wants to be at war, that wants to defeat, that wants to collect, that wants to be better than, that wants to always get more. The sacred, or the highest part of ourselves, is the part of us that just wants to be at peace. How can I become an instrument of peace? Not someone who's looking for peace, but someone who delivers it. There are opportunities every day. I was in a gas station just a few days ago, and in this gas station they had a car wash. And there was a young boy, he was maybe 18 or 19 years old, and he didn't speak English very well, and he couldn't figure out how to work the car wash. And he had put $2 in, and apparently it required $3. And he was in there waiting to pay for his car wash and trying to get an answer to why he couldn't get it to work. And I had just gotten some gasoline, and I walked in, and there was this man behind the counter berating this young boy and humiliating him and talking to him. And because he didn't understand the language, he talked louder to him. You know how people do that? You know, if someone doesn't understand you, you say, "What I said is," and they say, "I don't understand," and then you say it even louder. Well, that's what he was doing to this young boy. And I saw this is an opportunity right here in this instant to be an instrument of peace. And I put my arm around the young man, and I said, "Come with me." And I walked out to the machine, and I took $1, and I put it into and he walked away, and he was just so happy. One tiny little incident. These kinds of things, I suggest to you that you take this day and look for 5 occasions to be an instrument of peace. And you'll find one when you're on your way home, on the freeway. You'll find somebody who isn't going to let you get in. You find somebody who doesn't want to let you pass. And instead of giving them a hard time or being angry at them, try sending something called peace their way. There's a wonderful line that I have on the dashboard of my car. It says, "I can choose peace rather than this." And it's always a reminder that no matter how what I'm experiencing in my life, I want to be an instrument of peace. It's been said that the 3 most difficult things to do in the world are this. The first is to send love in response to hatred. The second is to defend the absent. That is, whoever's being gossiped about, you become their spokesperson. I do this with my children all the time when they're all saying this and that. She said that and he said that. I'll say, "Excuse me, but who is defending the absent person here?" "Well, why should anybody defend her?" I'll say, "Well, I'll just take her position right now if you don't mind." And the third is to admit when you were wrong. And it doesn't mean necessarily to say, "I just made a mistake." It means to say, "I have been making the wrong kinds of choices in my life with my mind. I've been putting my attention on what I don't want, on what others want for me, on what the world ought to be, on what it used to be, and I can't understand why it just keeps showing up, what I don't want, what others want for me, what I despise." I have to admit, I have to rewrite my agreement with reality. And so much of what St. Francis was speaking about back in the 13th century, because he was a man who was ridiculed wherever he went. And he was just out there trying to teach people to bring the solution, spiritual solution to your problems. If hatred is existing in your world, that's an energy field. It's a lower and a slow energy than the energy of love. If you can bring love to the presence of that hatred, it will be nullified just as if you were bringing light to darkness. But for most of us, What we do when we see hatred is we respond in kind to that hatred.